just to get started, if I introduce Claire and Steve
Sure.
as well. So, Claire, do you want to introduce yourself and what you do?
Yes, thank you very much. So my name is Claire Dillon. I'm the head of strategic partnerships at a company called Nearform. Nearform came from the open source world. We're one of the biggest contributors to the Node.js project. But through that work, we actually, because Node is great for kind of accelerating innovation, the company has kind of made its money basically, because we do all the open source stuff for free, obviously, but how we make our money is actually building innovative new projects really quickly. And as such, actually, DevOps has turned into be one of the most important things that we do. And so, we started out saying, open source is the way to accelerate things, but actually, there's a little bit about the technology. There's a lot about the methodology and the people and stuff like that. So we focus a lot on best practices around DevOps and things like that now.
Awesome. And because Nearform come from the Node community, obviously the microservice architecture is really kind of started in that community as well. So you're quite ahead in that space.
Yeah, and growing in that space.
Okay,
so yeah,
great.
but just to kind of put a warning out there, I am not a DevOps engineer. We mostly, or I at least mostly focus on talking to the kind of business people about why DevOps is important.
Gotcha.
And how that kind of skirting the chaos of between innovation and reliability, and how much you would want to put into innovation projects around DevOps, how much you'd want to invest in that. It's a little bit about that kind of value discussion around why DevOps, in as much as the innards of it.
The how.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So over to Stephen as well. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Steve Thayer. I'm the co-founder of Devops Group. So we're a company that's a professional services company based in Cardiff, but with people all around the UK that help organisations adopt, DevOps ways of working, DevOps tools, DevOps technology. We really heavily sort of focused on, I guess, three things. It's modernising applications, modernising infrastructure, and modernising ways of working. We believe you have to do all three. To come to your point on that line of chaos thing, if all you're doing is adopting the tools and you have a 6-month waterfall process at the start, let's just guess your release cycle is now going to be six months and 1 day. It's pointless. You've got to change the whole system. Yeah. So we help organisations do that.
So I'm going to just start us with a quick leading question, then we'll get going and we'll take Q&A. And I've got some pre-prepared ones, and nobody feels like questions, so we'll be fine. So the first one I wanted to just talk about was, we talk about DevOps culture change, and we've been talking a lot about like how we changed our culture. First of all, how would we define sort of culture, and what do you find as like the DevOps culture change? What does that mean, sort of thing? And me and Donovan spoke about all that day.
Yeah. I'm going to yield. I'm going to yield.
Yeah, I mean, I can take that one. The easiest way that I can sort of summarize, culture. A lot of people talk about DevOps culture, and then they never give a definition of what culture is. Ultimately, culture is the way your organization and the people inside your organization see the world. It's the way you look at problems. It's the way you solve problems. It's what you teach to the new people that join your company. That's the way that things get done here. And a classic example I always use is, what happens if it's somebody's birthday in your organization? Do you completely ignore it? Do they bring in a cake? Does somebody else bring in a cake for them? Do you all go to lunch? If you were to ask that question about your organisation, that will tell us something about the type of organisation you have. Do you have work visible on the walls inside your organisation, or is the only way that you find out what somebody's working on, burying 3 layers deep in a file share to pull out a project initiation document? Are you not allowed to put post-it notes up on the wall because somebody in facilities is worried that in 10 years' time, when they hand the lease back, they might have to repaint the walls? This says something about your culture. So that's what we mean when we're talking about culture.
Yeah, that's all brilliant. I'll add in maybe a couple of sound bites on the back of it, because I was at one other one recently, and people were saying culture is what happens when no one is looking. It's kind of the things that happen when no one's checking. That's a good sign. Or another one I liked was culture are the stories you tell in the pub. Like that's a really good indicator of how your culture is. It's what you think is important enough to talk to your friends about. And I was just thinking there earlier, and I was thinking about the one that you hear a lot of is like the culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah. For
and
sure.
I'd be of a fan of saying culture eats technical expertise for breakfast, because you could be as technically brilliant as you want, you can have the best tools in the world, but to your point, if you don't get the culture right, it's all useless.
So I describe Microsoft as the organization with the
the greatest standard deviation of intelligence of any place I've worked at. Because you get the same, like, no offense, we're recording this, but anyway.
No one knows
Too
who
late.
to, you know? We're
Too
behind the
late.
curve.
Might as well
To the other
name names.
Microsoft
Go ahead.
employees in the room.
So you get the same idiots in our company as are everywhere. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a company. Like, even though it's fancy Microsoft, we've got shiny stuff, whatever. It's just a company, and it's the same people everywhere. But I also believe those same people. You talk about high-performing teams. I'm a big believer in high-performing teams more than I am in high-performing individuals.
For sure.
Absolutely.
And I've seen individuals who I thought, who had just flipped, got an expression in Microsoft, flip the bit, I flipped the bit on them because they're an idiot, you know what I mean? And then I saw that same individual in a different team, in a different culture, and he was a high performer, and it was a high-performing team. So there's something that you have to get right in your organization to get that performance. And like you say, what happens when people aren't looking? It's great. Yeah. Cool. So we've talked a bit over lunch about like DevOps, awesome, but how do we get started? What do we do to sort of do this DevOps stuff? What should I, how am I going to get like this change in my organization? So, Claire, do you want to how any advice for people there? Obviously, we can come to Nearform and get
Hi, DevOps.
Yeah, sorry,
Well, it is an interesting point though, because we were talking about this earlier, Martin, and it's about the catalyst for change, right? So, there's a lot of organizations now who are coming to DevOps because they've heard it's the latest thing to do, and people are proving correlations between, company productivity and share price and all the. I mean, there's amazing correlations between people who do it well and company performance, and that is true and brilliant.
And that's because people like us keep running breakfast briefings for CIOs and CTOs and this sort of stuff, and we buy them dinner and we buy them lunch and we try and convince them that DevOps is absolutely awesome.
But I think there's a difference between organizations, like how people start on that journey. There are different ways into it, and sometimes it's a new leader coming in who's maybe done it before and seen that it works. And sometimes it's a third-party organization who comes in to help accelerate that journey. But what can be very difficult, I think, anyway, is in our experience, is when you have an organization who decide to just kind of experiment with it from first principles. Like go to a couple of breakfast briefings, and then let's jump in with both feet. And not to say that you do have to kind of jump in and make a commitment. But there's a couple of things that need to happen. There's the leadership commitment. And the commitment to get through any of those kind of pits of despair as you go through the process, and know that you're going to continue that investment. Mm-hmm. There's the business owners who want to be able to see a good balance between the idea of still being able to deliver new features and value and not just be focusing on the technical debt. Because sometimes it's always harder to get investment in a team of people who don't seem to be outputting anything but are just making things better in the background. Because it's harder to see the value of that. Yeah.
We're having that exact conversation with the team earlier on.
Yeah. So it's hard to justify that to a business, right?
Yeah.
But if you decide to actually approach it in a way in which you're doing both together, that can be more palatable, right? So you have a return on investment where you're talking to people about the importance of getting the innovation at the right speed with the right balance of reliability and security, and the best way to do that is this approach. But then to do that, you either have people who are in a senior enough position to be able to shepherd that change through, or you may need some external help to catalyze that and to help coach people through what will be the bumps along the way, right? Because it's again, and that's not just technical bumps in terms of potential, because obviously Azure DevOps is so easy, so maybe that's not where your problems lie, but those kind of those
they're never the hardest problems.
They're never the hardest problems. The hardest problems are when developers say, well, I always did it this way, and I don't want to really talk to that person, and I want control of what I do myself, and breaking down those barriers and silos, and helping people to work as a team rather than having this it's not my problem, mate, kind of conversation.
Look, I guess a question for you two, and I'll preempt the answer slightly, is Microsoft went through its own transformation. You had a transformational leader at the top in Satya, setting out the values and the behaviours that we want to see. And I'm pretty sure that at the grassroots, you had all the engineers that wanted to adopt DevOps and all these great tools and get involved. And there was a really good story at Ignite where a guy who was, his own personal journey to site reliability engineering, which I recommend somebody. He talked about being a server hugger. I come from a long line of server huggers, and he just talked about his own personal journey to stop being a server hugger and embrace infrastructure. The problem that you have is the people in the middle. Yeah. Which is generally referred to as the frozen middle. So if you think about it like one of those ice cream sandwiches, you got a nice layer of biscuit on the top, that's your senior leadership, they want it. You've got a nice layer of engineers at the bottom, they want it. And in the middle, frozen, because you've got a whole bunch of people whose job was to take stuff from Excel and put it into PowerPoint and back again.
But they got rewarded for being there by being good at how they did it in the past.
Correct.
So that's why they're there.
Yeah, and that's the biggest challenge. And I just wondered, would that play out in your experience of the Microsoft transformation that froze the middle, or how to unfreeze the middle?
Yeah, we fired a lot of the middle, but no.
Yeah. I felt that we had the advantage that we are a software company.
Yeah.
That made it a lot easier for us, right? Because when I go to industries like automotive or air travel, especially automotive, right? Waterfall works when you're building a car.
Yeah.
And to tell an executive that waterfall doesn't work when you're writing software, they just don't want to hear that, right? And it's like, no, it works great. Like, look, we built this car. You mean tell me you can't build software with the same process? We're like, no, it doesn't work the same way, and I have a lot of trouble. But when you go to an organization that writes software for a living, that conversation is much easier to have. Because your executives, even Buck Hodges, who's a director of engineering, was a programmer on the actual product for which he's now an executive on, right? So I don't believe I wouldn't say that we don't have a frozen middle, but it's much softer. We're like that sandwich that's been melting a little bit.
left out in the sun.
Exactly.
Partially defrosted already.
Exactly.
No, it's really interesting because there was grassroots stuff coming up. And you saw the graph went back to 2010, whatever, that's before Sachi came in. And there was stuff going on from the bottom, and there was actually Steve Ballmer, when he was talking about one Microsoft and trying to break down those barriers. But what I think happened was, so grassroots wanting to do stuff, and everybody go do stuff, like don't ask permission.
That was going to be my answer to the last question.
Yeah.
But I agree, like that's my biggest advice.
Just go do some stuff, like build up expertise, like get there. But, because you need to build it up you need to build up the muscle. Top down, we want to do this. And the top down, it's all right to have a top down edict. Okay, go do DevOps. Oh yeah, great, cheers boss. How do you want me to do business different? Well, I still want you to do business exactly the way you were doing it. Okay, and what questions are you going to ask me every quarter? Well, exactly the same questions I asked you last quarter. Okay, well, I'm probably going to keep working the same way I'm working then. So as leadership, what happened in Microsoft is we actually fundamentally changed our business models. Like fundamentally moved to a service-based organization. And it's same with the open source transformation. Like move to an open source, we know we need to do more open source because we know we need to ship quicker as well. We know we need to do DevOps because we know we need to ship quicker, because if we don't ship quicker, people who are shipping quickly are going to beat us because they're iterating. So let's change our business model to allow us to ship quicker. And then that came from the top down, like let's change our business model. So Brian Harry, who was my old boss, changed the business model for Azure DevOps, for TFS, to be let's build a service. Not thinking like anybody in a big company would want to use a service. He just thought, well, let's use a service. We'll have some smaller companies who want to use it. They'll give us the feedback on that product, and then we can bake those changes in, and we'll use it to make our big product better. So we changed our business model very disruptively to our major business to enable it down. So that's how we squished that goo. And as a leader, you have to ask different questions of your teams as well. So anyway.
And I think that's often the way that they can get into other organizations as well. So, if people, like it's harder to have a conversation where, it's let's change everything we've always done in the past.
Yeah, that's rough.
But these days with the whole kind of digital transformation story, and when people are trying to think about new business models and think about new ways to engage with customers or their supply chain or whatever they're thinking about to do in a new way, that's often a great place to actually bring in, let's experiment with how do we do it differently. So, picking off a place to experiment can sometimes lower the risk for people,
Right.
and can help people think about it in that balanced way of, right, well, we want to do this as quickly as possible to market, but we also want to do it in a way that fits with our organization's culture around security and regulation and all the rest of it, because it's different for everyone, right? There is no vanilla implementation.
And we all have different things that we're strong at and weak at, and different things that we have to focus
and
on.
different things that people care about in the
Yeah.
business.
Yeah, I think just to pick up on, you mentioned there the shift in business models. So there's a stat from Gartner. They did a survey of a couple of thousand executives, and they said only 8% of executives felt that their existing business model that their organisation uses right now will survive in the next 10 years. I think it was 10, maybe 15 years. So, if you're working in an organisation that's absolutely not trying to do anything different and thinks it can keep doing what it's been doing, even if it's been doing for 100 years.
Quit.
Yeah. Find somewhere else, because if they're not planning now to...
We're all hiring, by the way.
Yeah, we're all hiring, by the way. If you're not... if your organisation isn't planning to change the business, so we do a lot of work with insurance sector stuff. Every single one of those insurance sector clients is investing in insurtech startups. They're investing in incubators. They're taking little stakes in startups they think are interesting, because they're trying to make sure that they keep an eye on what they're doing, and eventually they'll buy them to acquire that technology or that capability. I mean, we've been working with a startup that was incubated completely inside a company. They went from company didn't exist to writing their first on-policy online, complete new claims engine in 9 months. And we worked with them on building all the stuff and in the infrastructure. And we said in that time, we deployed the Terraform to rebuild production 1,761 times in that 9 months. And you're kind of thinking, when was the last time you rebuilt your production environment in the last 5 years, let alone doing it 1,761 times in 9 months? When was the last time your business was able to take from an idea to having, a running platform and actually taking a real customer order in 9 months in a brand new insurance platform? I mean,
But
the power of doing this the right way.
And it takes storytelling like that to actually help business people understand the why around these sort of things. Because if you're just telling them, like if you're just talking DevOps language about optimizing your time to production and everything like that, they don't necessarily get that. But you start talking those kinds of, like, in terms of getting a change to the customer or trying out a new business model with your customers, or getting that business agility in, and that's not agile. Like I remember having this big discussion with our technical team where I was kind of saying we're bringing in agility, and they're like, or we're making businesses more agile, and they're like, well, this is not agile, like this is not lean, and I'm like, no, I'm not talking about the technical agile. I'm talking about making businesses more agile, because business people want to be more agile. That doesn't mean they want to do agile.
Sure.
So there's a kind of a language thing there.
Let's make sure, because we could talk to ourselves all day, but we're here to talk to you. So what questions do you have for us? Go ahead.
And I will repeat. Go on, Stephen. Grab that.
I think Donovan kind of touched on this when you described Microsoft as your core business is software, or maybe it was Martin. But for a company where the core business is not software, I think, what advice would you give for influencing the kind of top layer of the ice cream sandwich, that DevOps culture needs to happen for the part of the business that's involved in software, but it might not be the best culture for the majority of the business that's not involved in that software? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Can you tell what sector it is? Just give us highest level.
We are a national mapping agency of a country not too far from here.
One of the things that I've noticed works really well is to hire in the person to say the same words that you're going to say, because your boss is not going to listen to you, right? Like, you joke, but I'm dead serious, and I will come in as an outside consultant. I'll say the exact same words you're going to say, and they'll take notes, right? And what's interesting is
I
when
made
was
a business
consultant-
model out of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When I was consulting for so long, I would go off and I'd start doing this big demo, and I'd say something, and someone in the room would just sulk, right? Like, dude, like, because the reason that they're upset is because their manager is now taking notes, and he's like, I've said that exact same freaking thing for like the last year. Why are they listening to this guy? And after the meeting, I would make a beeline to that person, say, tell me what else to say, right? Because you've been here for years. I've only been here for an hour, but I know. Tell me what to say. I would take notes, and I would just regurgitate that in the next meeting, and they would all be taking notes and eating it up. So get someone that they respect. And I'm not saying they don't respect you, but it's weird how they'll listen to someone from the outside.
Well, they've paid for the advice, and so they're opening themselves up for it. You know?
Yeah. And so that's one advice I would give you. And the other one is convince them with results, not with words. Right? So just go make one of these small changes. Just go be faster, right? Because you've implemented continuous integration, because you've implemented unit testing. You're shipping higher quality code, not because you took 9 months to go figure something out, or you took a whole month off to go try to brainstorm something, or a spike that never seems to end, but you're investing 15 minutes a day and making your team and yourself more efficient. And then all of a sudden they're going to eventually say, like, man, you guys are getting a lot more work done now than you were before. What are you doing? And then that's when you explain it to them. If you go and you try to convince them with words and PowerPoint that this is a good idea to do, and they say no and you do it anyway, I would be pissed as your manager, right? But if you didn't ask me and you just started doing your job, which is, this is your job, right? Your job is to do the best job possible, and that includes doing the latest and greatest technologies, continuous integration, continuous delivery, infrastructure as code. To me, that is your job. Why are you having to go ask permission or convince your boss if you can go do your job? Right? So when he said don't go ask for permission, I cannot stress that enough. It is your job to do this stuff, right? So just do it and let the results speak for themselves.
And that's what actually happened in Microsoft, where we had teams like our team that were doing Agile and little a Agile and doing DevOps and things, and also working differently with open source, and we were having success. And then leadership sees this part of the org having success, and then wanders over to the Windows team as an example and says, go do some of that. Like, whatever they're doing, go do that. And then they start to pick things up, and that's when it starts to become culture, because it's you've taken like what's incubating in teams and things, and there's lots of ideas incubating in all different teams, and they don't all bubble up. But if you can start building up something, have a bit of early success, and then some people sort of recognizing that and then do it. Sorry, that was an end.
No, I would just also say that the way you described. I really liked your very good PowerPoint, by the way. Moving people into the kind of one group. Where
I didn't do that animation, but
that was very impressive. But I love that story too, because I think it's also important to your point about, yes, it's your job, but again, it's easier to fold that into a team of people who are doing for whom that is not their only output, right? Yeah. Because this is why I'll bring this back to this idea that it's harder to get funding for an optimization project than it is for a delivery project of business value. Yeah. Not that optimization doesn't give business value, but it's just harder to get funding for it than an innovation project where you can demonstrate this stuff.
But if you're calling it what did you call it, a fundamental, the type of project you just referred to, I've forgotten the word, but I mean, if you're using that language, I want to build a platform to do X, and I want 250 grand to do it, and your boss says no, I'd say no too. Yeah. I'm going to reduce the operational risk of the organization by 30% by increasing our resilience and achieving our disaster recovery targets faster. Oh, yeah, sure. People only care about two things: making money and reducing risk. Do you know what I mean? So if you can't prove how you can make money, you can sure as hell prove how you can reduce risk. I can reduce risk because I redeployed the production environment 1,761 times in the last 9 months. Going back to your point.
But if it doesn't give you customer value and you don't succeed, then you won't win, and that's why you can't go too far. You know what I mean? Like, there has to be a reason why you're doing those things.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're working in anything that's a national critical infrastructure or financial services, if you can prove that you have greater resiliency, that can actually flow through into measurable bottom lines for the organization, because the more resilient you are and more sort of stuff, therefore, that can go all the way through to affect the capital ratios that you need to keep, because I have less risk, or I can calculate an insurance policy faster and better and more accurately because I've got this great platform and I can scale it out. Therefore, I know my risk is more accurate, therefore I don't have to keep as much cash in the bank to help cover that risk. So, make money or reduce risk. You're never going to lose it. Well, you might lose, but you're going to have a much better chance of winning if you pick one of those two.
Yeah. And which you pick, and the balance between those arguments depends on your sector and what your company or organization's
and
goals
your culture.
are. Yeah, and your culture actually, yeah. So it's probably a different set of justification depending on where you're sitting.
Yeah, I really
I'm going to go back out to the audience. Go on.
So
Questions?
anyone else have a question? Otherwise, we'll, like I said, you need to jump in and stop us.
Yeah.
Once we've answered the question, say shh. And
So
then
who is going through a DevOps transformation, and what's the biggest problem that you currently find? Right.
Everyone's going through one, just moving slower than others. It's so slow that you don't see it moving.
So I think we're starting to look at DevOps and culture change, and I think fortunately our managers and senior execs within the organisation are on board and recognise some of the value in this. And we're starting to think about how we might apply some of the DevOps culture change and ways of working to some of our more traditional products that we manage as well, your big ERPs, for example. How far can you take it with those? That's something I'm trying to get my head around.
So like third party, not stuff you're building, but bringing in
that's
stuff.
I get asked that all the time. It doesn't really fit.
Well, see,
I can disagree with that. So I'll hook you up with one of our consultants, Raj. He used to run a $40 million portfolio for BAE Systems. So his portfolio was ServiceNow, SuccessFactors, SAP, SharePoint, and I can't remember the other one. That was the portfolio that he ran. So he implemented lots of DevOps, but the ways of working. So he created multidisciplinary product aligned teams. He brought the work to the people, and he made the work visible. He created waste snakes. He eliminated waste. He did all this sort of stuff. And they got to a point where it was like from 9 months lead time for changes to some of these core systems to 2 weeks lead time to change. They had one team that actually had to go back to the business and said, well, we've run out of work to do.
How is that not just lean?
Well, yeah, so I mean, the problem is lean and DevOps and this kind of stuff is so come together,
I don't know that I would agree, because I could do everything that you just said before the word DevOps even existed without deploying a piece of software.
But agile, like DevOps is a natural.
No argument there, but those are two drastically different things. His question was specifically about DevOps on an ERP system that he does not write. What you just described is about reducing waste in that
changing the ways of working.
Exactly, and I separate agile and DevOps. Like, yes, they're natural, and I think you need to be really good at agile to be good at DevOps, or at least reap the benefits of DevOps, right? But they're drastically different things.
What are the differences?
For example, if you were to ask me to come in and talk about agile, I would not talk about continuous integration necessarily, or continuous delivery, or infrastructure as code, or monitoring. It is about producing an increment of shippable software. Done. Full stop. That is what Agile is supposed to do. And the reason that DevOps is so popular right now is because Agile left you out in the lurch on how do you deploy it now. Yeah, I did what you said, Agile. I produced an increment of shippable software. Now what? And then now all of a sudden DevOps has come in.
You move the bottleneck to the ops team.
Exactly. And that's beautiful. And it highlighted the fact that, you have another problem now. Like, maybe you were really slow, your lead times were really bad, you had a lot of waste in your process, and now you're able to produce these increments of shippable software, and the desire to ship it becomes so strong that you have to go to DevOps, and you have to start shipping that product. That's why what he asked and what you said to me, I agree with everything that you said, but I would not say that that is a DevOps transformation. That is a lean transformation, that is an agile, that's a work in process transformation, which I think would lead into a fantastic DevOps transformation, but are not the same. Okay. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Because, like, how do I do DevOps on someone that I didn't write, right? I don't control the product backlog. I don't control the planning. I don't really control the deployment. I wouldn't use release management. I wouldn't use any of the tools we talked about to deploy an ERP system that I bought from someone else.
I mean, I'd certainly use the DevOps tooling to build out the infrastructure that ERP system runs on. Yeah, I could build out the platform. I mean, most of the tools these days, let's take ServiceNow. ServiceNow has the concept of a change set. I think update set, change set. I can't remember the exact that phrase. You can build a change set, but you can then automate the application of that change set. So, to say all of these tools are all Stone Age is not necessarily. Most of them will have unattended installers for patching. I mean, if you're running a patch, why wouldn't I put a patch through a DevOps pipeline to apply that patch and run my regression?
I would use System Center for something like that, right?
Yeah.
Right? So we have tools that predate all of this stuff that is designed to do what they're asking for, which is System Center. It's not You know what I mean? So would I really pull out release management to deploy a new update of Windows to 40,000 servers in my system? No. I would use System Center for that, right? And that we were doing that.
But you would
decades
use
ago.
DevOps like practices, like progressive exposure and things like that, wouldn't you? You'd expose it to a subset of your machines.
Some people do.
first.
Some people do. Even like for Windows 10, they'll try it out on a batch of their customers before
Yeah,
they give it
you
to
have them in
everybody.
different rings and things, and they have a certain
Potentially.
percentage of the organization.
But I still
in
wouldn't use
fast-track.
release management or Octopus Deploy to do any of that stuff.
No,
That's a concept.
well, that's
really
a tool
there.
thing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a core concept though. Like I don't know, it's interesting. Yeah, it's just, but it's. I love having the because you're making me think about it differently.
Yeah.
But it's just, I don't know. I just
But they do talk about like I mean, whatever, and this is back to the whole kind of difference between the technology and the culture.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah,
there's
sure.
cultural changes that are completely separate to the technology that people can and should be working on to
Sure.
make their organization more agile, like collaboration and better communication and all these sort of things as well, right? So, you know, I mean, if you've got a culture where there is a whole load of blame and you're in that situation that Microsoft used to be in with the guns and,
Yeah.
and all that kind of thing, like you know any kind of best practice tooling, if you ever got to DevOps, would not work anyway, right? Because you have to change that kind of behavior, right?
Yeah.
So if we are purely talking on the cultural aspect, there are still things one can do to get you more inclined to be better if you would do it DevOps,
Agreed.
right?
Agreed.
So even before you
Agreed.
do the tooling.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So I know that doesn't answer your question though, does it?
It was a great discussion.
Yeah.
Hearing the debate confirms it's not an easy answer.
No,
it really
absolutely
isn't.
not. Absolutely not.
And
absolutely
well,
not.
let's do it another way. Who here is having problems with all of their like COTS products and interdependencies, and that's like the bane of their life? Okay, yeah. See, it's a nightmare, and you know, I run into it everywhere. I used to be an SI, and
So funnily, you know, we were just doing this with a customer deploying into Azure, one of their first deployments into Azure, and you know, used Microsoft hub and spoke model, got monitoring everything, and it's really good. We build all that with Terraform and ARM and PowerShell DSC, et cetera. And then we have to hand over the virtual machines to the third-party vendors who come along and manually install their stuff like this. And you know,
what's worse is their business models incenting them to do that.
I know, right?
absolutely, yeah. But that and that was just the reality. So we're thinking about using a third-party tool, which is called UpGuard, which is sort of a change tracking tool that will track all the changes to the file system, track all the changes to the region. So at least we can know what in the hell these people have played with, and we're still trying to do snapshots and backups. But, we know that we can recreate all the hubs and all the spokes and all the network security groups and everything in another region when they want to roll this out. But, I mean, it was intensely frustrating. We can't destroy the environment because, each machine is now a snowflake.
Yeah, for sure. So what else do we have from
Yeah,
the
go on.
audience?
Other question.
Okay,
Yeah.
we have two. I'm good. We'll come to you in a second.
We'll start from the Mac and then...
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
there you go. Thanks.
Thanks.
So it's interesting because I think one of the biggest challenges for us is the term DevOps.
Yeah.
I think it's so broad,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
you just demonstrated how broad it is by debating over it. And I
Yeah.
think that's part of the problem. If you can't be broken down to convince, our problem is it's very difficult to convince senior management or senior leadership team the very high level DevOps this idea because they think they're already doing it.
Yeah.
They think, oh yeah, well our people are already working together and delivering value to customers. But it's the breaking down of those areas. that
Well, for
allows
me,
us-
the DevOps thing is about getting better at doing that and continuously improving. But anyway, carry on.
Because we have a similar problem to you. We've got modern products with modern technology stack where it's pretty straightforward. You can it's easy to sell that one. But then with the old COTS,
Yeah.
take it out, build a shippable piece of software, package it, deliver it to site, unpack it, 6 months project, configure it all up. There's loads of things that you've discussed today that you can add value and make that much more efficient. But we're not going to do full DevOps because it would never make sense, would it?
Yeah.
But there's elements of all the things you've described,
Exactly.
like automation.
That don't work. Yeah, source control management, all that other stuff. That
Well,
we
does it
are
need,
on. It doesn't have to be, but there's a disconnect there, right? When you don't write the software, you have to squint really hard to make these best practices work. And I'm thinking, why are we doing that? That's just not what this is. It's not the best tool for the job.
But you're still delivering value to your end users.
It is. And
I'm going back to your definition.
I know. And I trust me, I remember I was at some company who were like, well, we want to automate the putting in of our conference systems inside of our conference rooms. Is that DevOps? I'm like squinting as hard as I can. I'm like, what?
Well, there's
Like,
definitely
it
things
just-
you can learn from DevOps.
Exactly, right? It's all about constantly improving, finding what hurts the most. If you focus on what hurts the most and get that out of your way, then and deliver value, you could argue that you are. right?
And so then maybe it's just leaving out the term DevOps. Like
Yeah.
I find that this whole thing of like we're going to a practice,
Yeah.
it scares the bejesus out of
Yeah,
people
for sure.
because they're like what the why?
Yeah,
what?
another
I
excuse
don't-
not
I
to
don't-
write documentation.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's like I don't even understand what you're talking about. So why on earth would I
Yeah.
invest in that? But it's only when you bring it back to the actual measurements that the business people care about. That's what the discussion should be about. So look for the pain points, look for the priorities, see if the pain point is related to the priority. Say you're going to address those. Then you're on a path, and rather than saying I want to do DevOps. In fact,
Correct.
I mean, if some leader comes in and goes, "I've heard we should do DevOps" because they heard it in some presentation, you should be scared, like, because it's not for the sake of it, like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Microphone.
Mike.
It is probably worth mentioning that a lot of the COTS vendors are waking up to this problem. You look at, I mean, we were talking about Sitecore earlier. A lot of these vendors making these, content management systems, etc. They're making them more modular. And in some cases, you can go to there and right. If you want to use Puppet to install and configure our software, you want to use Ansible, you want to use Chef. They're embracing,
They're
DevOps
only doing that
to
because
make.
these people are telling them. They need it.
Exactly, making it more modular.
Yeah. There was a question here.
Right,
Does that
in the
answer
front.
yours? Yeah.
Does that answer yours? So the only
It's
thing I
sort of
would
like
say.
a statement and a question.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
statement.
yeah.
There is a model for DevOps which people often refer to is called CALMS: culture, automation, lean, measurement, sharing. So CALMS. So if you just search for DevOps CALMS: culture, automation, lean, measurement, sharing. Americans tend to leave the L out, funnily enough, and just call it CAMS: culture, automation, measurement, and sharing. That's a model that is useful to look at to give you a little bit of a checklist. We go into organizations and say, yeah, we've been doing DevOps for 12 months now. Oh, awesome. So, tell me, what you're doing, in production. Oh, we haven't talked to ops yet. Probably because ops was outsourced to Capgemini or Tech Mahindra or Tata.
Gotcha.
And that's DevOps in an outsourced environment, that's another whole
Exactly.
problem.
Go on then.
Right here.
When we talk about DevOps culture change, I think that often miss the impact of the change on the quality of the product that comes at the end of the pipeline. And because there is a resiliency and there is this site which allows you to roll back quick or deploy quick, fail fast, check.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you don't need that quality anymore. Therefore, in my view, sometimes DevOps can impact adversely the solution architecture, planning, and design at the beginning, because people may get into impression that we will sort out those kind of issues as we go to the path.
But I think.
And
The question was that people are interpreting DevOps as an excuse not to test and to test in production.
No, actually, DevOps makes you testing more, be more aware of how quality product needs to be built.
So what was your point when you were talking
The
about
logging
failing
metrics,
fast and putting bad code in
because
quality?
you don't need to put this much attention to the solution architecture and what the product is going to achieve at the very end. So because you can assume that if it fails fast, we're going to roll back and develop it again. And that way, iterative development, when you do little improvements, works, but it doesn't always work. And DevOps culture change, in my view, is not always the answer to all software development ideas.
Oh, I see.
To
Okay.
give you an example, maybe we have a Boeing planes falling off the sky. Maybe now no one thought about at the design level about what could be the impact.
So when I go into a bunch of customers, 1809 update is what they quite often hit me over the head with. You know what I mean? The Windows 1809 update. But yeah, I see what you're saying there.
So
I disagree, because we've done some major architectural changes while also doing DevOps, and what we're doing is trying to strike a balance. So we have gone in and split out services and pulled them apart. We've taken the way that work item tracking, Azure Boards works, and completely refactored it from it. You don't really care because you don't know, because you didn't notice. But you know how you can customize your work items now in Azure DevOps? Well, that's what we did. But to do that, it took a massive re-engineering of completely the way we built it. And that's why that feature that you thought was so simple took us so long to deliver, was because we had to do lots of architectural redesign too. But we did have to figure out how to split it into increments. And that made it harder to figure out a way rather than doing the upfront way. Go on.
It's funny that you were saying that we made architectural changes and still deliver it out. We were required to make those architectural changes to move at the speed in which we want to move, is the way that I describe that, right? Because the way that the microservices are able to negotiate at runtime what version they're supposed to use, the way that we actually implement feature flags, without them we still could not ship every 3 weeks, right? We had to do that to move faster. So architectural changes are something that are sometimes a necessity to move at the speed in which you want to move, but I'm still not sure that answers your question though.
I think, is your question more about that tension between, I think there's always a tension when people are trying to adopt Agile, when you're wedded to big upfront design. And I feel it myself. There's sometimes I look at somebody gets 6 months into a project and I go, well, you've now hit a problem that, to be honest, 5 minutes of genuine reflection at the start of the project should have anticipated. Do you know what I mean? I feel that sometimes as well, is that sometimes organizations can rush in. You sort of referred to earlier about like the last responsible moment. It's a concept from Agile, the last responsible moment. Yeah, don't make the line between the last responsible moment and the first irresponsible moment really narrow. Give yourself a little bit of room to play with. Because too many organizations are using it as an excuse for not doing at least some very high-level design, some thinking about how the system going to come.
Yeah, people use Agile as an excuse not to write docs when nowhere in the manifesto does it say that, right? Nowhere does it say don't write docs. So that's what I thought you were going with, right, testing in production as an excuse not to test earlier, but that's not what you were saying. So I think you had an example that you thought was going to help.
I just thought, what's the impact of the culture change?
Right. Yeah.
On the final product quality, because when you can fail fast and roll back easily, you don't pay too much attention into failing because you can just bring it back quickly. So you do some kind of change your appetite for risk.
Yeah.
That's changed your appetite. And now you talk about culture, and I just wonder how do you see it? So that's not a question.
Okay. Yeah. So in terms of how did our culture change in terms of quality, and what did we see?
An appetite for risk.
Yeah, it went in waves. If I'm being honest, we did see some of the, ship. Ooh, we went down. We had a lightning strike and we're down. Right, okay, so we need to invest some stuff in here. So there's definitely been waves like this where we've hovered around the ideal, the level that we'd like to say we're at. But, where we realize we've got a problem and then it becomes a big enough problem that we actually start doing something about it. The test stuff that I was talking about, how we made that test infrastructure change, we didn't decide to do that overnight, It became a big enough problem that we then had to do something about it. So, there has been moments where quality has gone down a bit and then we realized it and then readdressed how we're doing things. But overall, anyone here who installed TFS in the old days and then installs modern versions of TFS on-prem, that's the on-prem product, the quality of the install process is massively better now because we're installing it 3 times a day. You know what I mean? And then the quality of the performance in our UI is dramatically improved. We're at an AppDex 0.9 and things, and we're constantly striving to get higher performance because we can tweak things a little bit, and so.
And I think another one of those culture waves is when our team is on call.
Yeah.
Right, they're responsible for the software 24/7. So quality is not something that you skate by and fail fast because you're going to be woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning if you do that. So when your culture is you wrote it, you run it, quality is the most paramount. And also when you dog food what you use, quality also becomes extremely important because if we deploy into Ring 0 stuff that doesn't work, 700 engineers don't get to work today, right? It doesn't just take down
10,000, but yeah.
No,
okay.
Ring 0.
Yeah.
Ring 0 is just the Azure DevOps team. So 700 engineers come into work and they can't work because someone screwed up. So quality is of the utmost importance to us for multiple reasons. But there was a time, like you said, it ebbs and flows. And and now Buck Hodges implements the bug bar to keep our technical debt at a manageable level.
Well, between TFS 2005 and TFS 2008, we went through a nadir of quality. It was horrific. And that's why if you look, it's a history lesson now, but if you look at the features, the end user features that were delivered between TFS 2005 and 2008, basically the build system it wasn't much.
Yeah,
and that's because we were fighting through those exact same quality things. And that was before DevOps. Did you have anything on that one? Or?
No, I think that
Okay,
it was much more around the run-up.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I just wanted to respond to this question. So,
Sure.
disclaimer: I'm from an ops background.
Hey,
Okay, cool.
Okay.
welcome.
So,
exactly.
So this issue, I mean, the context was DevOps, but actually existed in the agile approach.
Yeah.
Right? From
It was
an ops
worse with agile.
Yeah. So from an ops background, the developers were sprinting away because from an ops background, we wanted everything designed out. We wanted to see what the target state looked like. But the agile guys were going, oh, no, we can just think about it as we go along. We'll assign 10% per sprint for emergent architecture. So I don't think it's a new thing as far as DevOps. It's always been there. The way to get around it is to have some guiding principles around how you build stuff, and you build that into your sprints. So
Would you have felt so objected by that if you were involved in those meetings where they were planning
but that's
out?
what I mean. So,
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the
Yeah.
first thing I do
Yes.
when I used to fall in like Black Ops Scrum Master, come save my team. I would say, tell me everyone that this team interacts with, everybody. I want to know the QA teams they interact with. I want to know the ops team they interact with. Oh yeah, and by the way, we're having a meeting tomorrow, and every one of those people need to be in that
and
room
that forces
right now.
you to think about it because
Exactly.
that person's.
And when we're grooming our product backlog, you're supposed to spend about 20% of your current sprint grooming your next sprint. That includes your QA people, that includes your devs, that includes your operations people, that includes everybody. Because when I'm grooming this next microservice, I want to know how we're going to deploy the infrastructure. And I don't want to give you a request tomorrow. Hey, man, I'm deploying this infrastructure tomorrow. Go get it. No, you should have been able to say, yeah, I'm going to be working on the ARM templates or the Terraform files that are going to deploy the infrastructure to host that microservice while you're developing the microservice. And that's not happening in a lot of organizations because you're not brought into the process, right? So, and I think that's a lot of resistance happens that way.
You want to grab the microphone and respond?
Go ahead. Okay.
So I'm an ops person as well, infrastructure architect, operations manager. I think there's one assumption in what you said. I firmly believe that operability requirements need to be baked in. Don't call them non-functional requirements, call them operability requirements. They're operability requirements there to reduce risk. Then they need to be baked in. But I need to know all the design and architecture up front because you're thinking, because Compact takes 3 months to deliver, some ProLiant servers, and EMC takes 6 months to deliver a new SAN, and BT take 9 months to deliver a new thing. The reality is, if you can provision that infrastructure using all these techniques we've been talking about today really quickly, how much do you really need to know up front? Now, if they're suddenly going to start using a graph database or MongoDB and nobody in your ops teams knows how to use a graph database or manage MongoDB, absolutely, that's not a decision you want dropped on you at the last minute because then you've got to suddenly scrabble around and try and support that. But I think I think there's a challenge for the ops people as well, as we've got to ask ourselves, what do we really need to know when? And we don't need to know all of it up front, as long as we're part of the journey and part of the conversation.
Because you would have known Mongo was coming and had time to go learn how to do it before we actually needed it. But you're being told the day before we need it, we need a MongoDB tomorrow.
I'm part of the conversation.
Sure,
Great.
absolutely.
I feel like I'm part of the team.
I
feel
used
like
to have the
delivering
same
value.
challenge of DBAs who would tell me that, no, Donovan, we need to figure out every ER diagram, every table, every stored procedure, every foreign key. We have to figure it all out before you write a single line of software. And I would fight that tooth and nail. And sometimes I'd just sound like, fine. I'm going to give you 3 months. Go do the database. You just got to give me one promise. It's like, what's that? You can never change it. Donovan, that's ridiculous. Of course we're going to change it. Then why the hell am I giving you 3 months to go do it then? Right? Give me the table I need tomorrow so that we can go show value to our end users, and you can give me another table next week, right?
The problem is,
that's how you
the problem you do get is when you realize at some point, maybe a relational database wasn't the right thing to use.
Yeah,
and
that's a big architectural change.
And that would also be a good conversation to start having with the DBA earlier.
Yeah,
right? Because if you knew where we were
going.
going, exactly, they're like, you know what, there's a cool new database that you might want to look into now, not go off on this bad assumption and then go demand that I create this database for you that's simply going to be impossible to create.
There is a Microsoft slide which I don't think was in your deck that was talking about the release planning windows. 2 week or 3 week cycle. I'm going to be 90% sure I'm going to deliver it. Then there's like then a month, I drop down to 80%. 3 months I drop down to 70%, and 12 months I drop down to 60%.
The numbers are a lot lower once you get past the 3 weeks.
What's the point of me putting together a year-long roadmap and giving this to my boss, and saying we're 100% guaranteed we're going to achieve this stuff this year?
That was the mistake, is that they
just put-
100% guaranteed
exactly.
it, right? It's,
Put
it's
it
a
at
vision that you know
60%.
you're going to change.
Yeah, put
Yeah.
it at 60%. We think this is the stuff that prioritized that we think at 60% likelihood, because we know that 40 or 50% of what we did last year was not the stuff we planned at the start of the year. Stop promising stupid things like this is 100% of what we're going to deliver in 12 months' time.
If you do, you're still waterfall, because you're not open to change, and that's what Agile's about inspect and adapt. The environment has changed, our competitors have changed, and we need to go fix that.
Yeah, I think the best definition of waterfall project management was that I ever heard was it was a commitment to never learn anything over the lifetime of the project, which I just think is brilliant.
Yeah, it's very accurate.
Hi. I want to get your opinions on something which I battle a lot in the industry, working with recruiters and whoever else. DevOps as a job title. So I'm a DevOps engineer.
I've got DevOps in my title too.
Me too.
But anyway, carry on.
Me too. I cringe a little bit, but
You're
yeah.
an engineer.
my company name, dude.
Yeah. So a big thing I see with companies recruiting and whatever else, we have it in our own company. That's the DevOps engineer. No. You're a company who are doing DevOps.
Exactly.
So that's kind of all you're
Exactly.
Infrastructure automations engineer. I really like the term platform engineer.
You need a microphone.
Oh, you know what? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say I really like the phrase platform engineer, mostly because I've ever read the book. Have you read the book The Platform Revolution by a couple of guys from MIT? It's really good. But, we try and say to organizations, some organizations, and you guys touched on that, where the responsibility, can you pick all your own tools? Now, obviously, you've got Azure DevOps. This is a platform, as you said. But, we work into some organizations, one team is using Jenkins, one team's using TeamCity, one team's using Circle CI, one team's using Drone, blah, blah, blah. And eventually somebody in the organization goes, I'm tired of paying a fortune for all of these tools. And you sort of say, is it really important that you, the developer team in your little microservice team, spend all your time fighting Jenkins configuration? Or does it make sense for the organization to say, hey, we're going to standardize on Jenkins, or we're going to standardize on Azure DevOps and have a team run the platform for you? And I think that expands out to your monitoring platform, elements of your database platform. But the key thing is that the interface into those is APIs. It's platform as a service. If I want a new database, I don't have to send a ServiceNow ticket. I just call an API. And many organizations are moving to this model of feature teams supported by platform team, a platform organization.
Yeah.
It can also depend on the time in which you're at in terms of the implementation, right? So it may make sense, for example, at the beginning, if you haven't got anything in place, to maybe hire a third-party DevOps person or whatever. But I would also think, because there are those tasks that you want all the engineers to be, the developers to be actually doing and everything like that. But there are also specific things that you want a particular someone to be good at to help people get over the bumps, right? So certainly from our perspective, we would often see that you might have a person who's expert in, DevOps, but they would also be expert in conflict resolution. And seriously, it's kind of like, okay, we're having a major fight now about which tools to use, like who's going to adjudicate, like who's going to help us get to an answer here. And it's not like everyone's good at that, So you may want to think about what we've seen work well is even having a floating resource that comes and helps coach people through these issues.
You said the right word there. The DevOps engineer is a word that I don't like. A DevOps coach, a Scrum coach, an Agile coach, I get, right?
Because enable
exactly, you want to bring that person in temporarily, right, to make sure that this team is doing DevOps correctly, but it's not a role, right?
And not only at the start, but also over time. One of the stories that our guys tell would be the idea of you come in after a while and you ask people, you ask the CTO and then you ask the team lead and then you ask the actual developers, how are we doing on DevOps? And if the answer varies, then you've got problems, right? You need to come back in again and kind of have another look at what's happening, So
there's a couple of things there as well. We as engineers, we worry too much about what we call things, just in general.
That's true.
but it's not. You're not the only one.
I'm the one that let Azure DevOps get through, so I can, you know what I mean?
I was just about to say that.
Trust me, you all worry too much about names. So, we worry too much about that in general. But it's how do we scale, resources is a common thing. You talk about being the ops guy. Quite often you're there's one or two DBAs, one or two really good Linux admins, in the entire org. And what DevOps, when you're doing DevOps in a big team, you can't have that person spending lots of time with teams. So you've got to find
Context
ways.
switching will kill them.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got to find, and nor can you have, I had the fancy graph, the ideal world where you get, a pizza team and it's got one person with every shirt and they're in the team. Well, yeah, but to be honest, Chandru is a genius at SQL storage on our team, and I'd rather have him as like the SQL data expert on my team than like another expert, another person who does SQL. And so you've got to find ways of sharing this knowledge across your organization and also finding ways about letting the whole team get good at it.
But this is the beauty of infrastructure as code,
Yes,
configuration as code,
exactly.
policy as code. It's in a repo and it can incrementally get better every single day and everybody can contribute. I mean, we use the example, say you hire an automation engineer into one of the feature teams. They're not part of this platform team. Maybe they know Azure Key Vault really, really well. And they can look at your templates and say, actually, we could do secrets much better if you used Azure Key Vault in this way.
Yeah.
Historically, the centralized IT team would be, not invented here, don't care, not going to listen to you. But if your templates and all that stuff is seen as enterprise open source, then all that engineer needs to do is send in a pull request to refactor that part of the code, and you go, yes, that's a genius idea. So it's inherent.
You're breaking down the ivory tower then as well.
Exactly, it's inherent in making everybody open to sharing and collaboration. Mm-hmm. So one thing I did want to say is, you said that SQL guide, it comes back to this idea of building platforms and putting the stuff in code, is that the trend we are seeing across the board at a group global IT department level is disintermediation. The IT departments are trying to work out how do they get out of the way. And the only way you get out of the way is automation enablement, shared source and templates and libraries.
But to answer your question, I hate that term.
Yeah.
And I think putting DevOps in people's title is really risky.
Don't worry about DevOps being in names. Don't worry
about
it.
And what's really weird is that I have a DevOps team at Microsoft, but I would never ask you to have a DevOps team in your organization because we don't do what you're about to have that team do. You're going to have that team be another silo between your ops teams and your dev teams. You didn't fix anything. You made it worse, right? You now have two sides of that problem. So I almost want to change the name of my team, but that's all we do. Like, we're freaking DevOps experts. That's all we do.
It is, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
One other story I want to tell you, and then we'll start wrapping up with the last question. So, I was talking about this scale thing. Like, we're trying to scale ops through the whole teams. We're trying to scale different bits of knowledge through the whole teams via automation stuff. One of the things we're doing right now is, I don't know if you noticed, Azure DevOps looks a bit shinier than it used to. It looks nicer. And we're actually trying to scale design across the whole team. And like with designers code, and we're actually building a design. We've got designers that are technical, and they're building us a design system, because that's a way. And we've got designers embedded in some teams, but then they're building a design system, which is a set of rules and guidelines, and it's markdown file in a wiki, which tells us how to do, which controls to use and why, and that's to help scale good design across the whole team as well. So it's not just ops. It's not just learning how to the Terraform expert or whatever. It's all these different things you've got to figure out how to scale, because you're going to be one team that's delivering. Right, we need to start wrapping up. Go on, we'll take your question and then your question, and we're going to do these super quick lightning round. Okay?
Tweet link.
Yeah.
The second biggest issue, I guess, in our organization is trying to fight for reduction of technical debt as opposed to delivering features. Which I understand that maybe we can get your assistance on and all that sort of stuff, to get an external person to come in and say, you really need to take down that technical debt, you'll move quicker. Oh, great. I'd say the biggest issue that we have in our organization at the moment is it feels, based on the conversation, that we're not doing Agile correctly.
I don't even have to know your company to know that's probably the right answer, right? Because very few people are actually doing it correctly.
Sure. Now, one of the biggest kind of pain points, I suppose, that we have is that, Agile evangelists and all of the fantastic people who know Agile really, really well appear to be really bad at describing what good looks like to our organization, because businesses or people at the highest level of the organization just switch off.
I don't think it's something that you're going to get from a PowerPoint or a presentation. You're just going to get from someone coming in and teaching one of your teams to be good at it. It's something you feel in your bones. Once you've been on a highly functioning Scrum team, you'll never accept anything other than that. But it's not something I could ever convey. And I'm extremely passionate about Agile. I could not convince your boss it's a good idea.
We have a couple of people here whose like job it is to convince bosses that it's a good idea to do DevOps. So how would you do it?
I mean,
how do you do it?
You don't talk about the how.
Exactly.
You're never, like, why are you ever talking to people who make decisions about how it's all brilliant? Like, you say,
I don't
this
care
is
how
what
the
I'm going
sausage
to-
roll is made, I just go to Greg's.
Say again?
I don't care how the sausage roll is made, I just go to
Yeah,
Greg's.
and it tastes good, doesn't it? Look at how these results. And so, you know, so when you, and this is the fault in so many of these trends. Like, people think that I have to convince people that Agile is great and this is how you do Agile. Then they don't care. Like, they just
Results
don't care.
speak
They
louder
only
than
want to
words.
care about results. And so then what you want to do is you want to either you point to results in house, or you point to results externally from their competitors or
you show them
people.
video.
and
Benchmarking
you have
against
people from
competitors
those
is huge.
places, you know, or
is a
not maybe
big
the
one.
competitors, but you have people from people who have done it well come talk to them about what a difference it made, and talking about the differences, not about how they did it, right? So and then they say, well, what are the top 3 steps, and then you follow the top 3 steps, but like, it's not about the theory of why DevOps or Agile or any of that is good. And I think that's because, I mean, a lot of people think all of these things are just a new shiny trend, and it's just like the last one. I'm spending more money on this one, and there'll be another one tomorrow, and why do I care? You know, they don't.
The competitor card works really well for me. It works really well for me because chances are your competitor is my customer too, and I've already visited them and told them all this. Right, so and I've literally seen people's eyes light up when they realize that, yeah, you're not the only airline I spoke to. I flew here on your competitor that I've already spoken to, right? And then they're like, holy, like, yeah, you're late, right? So get to this, because and I hate the fact that you could be the disruptor, but you're waiting for you to be disrupted for you to finally realize that this is important for you to do. I'm like, why are you waiting for bad things to happen to you before you realize that there's no longer a debate on if you should or shouldn't? You either do or you lose. It's that freaking simple. Let's get this one last question here.
Sorry, I was just going to say one thing is, again, you know, we use terms like technical debt. Well, what does that mean? I don't know what technical debt is.
I wouldn't have said that either. And that's a whole other discussion too.
You know, operational risk. We are increasing our operational risk. Then you're going to have the CFO's attention. I'll guarantee it.
What I would do is, instead of promising 5 things, I would just promise 4 and then go ahead and fix the technical debt anyway. Right? Stop asking for things they don't understand. I'm not ever going to give you permission to do something that I don't understand. Technical debt, whatever. It's like, whatever, I don't understand that. Okay, we're only going to deliver 4. These are just harder than we thought they were. Okay, give me those 4. And you're going to go fix. Well, you don't say that part.
I know, yeah, go on.
I would say I gave my talk at Ignite where I used the example of TSB. And trust me, in my 30 years in the industry, Paul Pester was the first CEO I know who got fired for an IT failure. I've never seen it in a FTSE 500 conversation. There are a lot of CEOs that you now have their attention about the mission criticality of their IT because they don't want to end up like the guy who was in charge of TSB.
Gotcha.
Go ahead. Last question.
Possibly a question to you, Don.
Sure.
What's the use case for Terraform compared with ARM templates?
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, so that's a religious debate.
Yeah,
so the question is, why would you use Terraform versus ARM templates, or what's the difference there? They're both great tools. The authoring of it's preference, right? Because the end goal is the same. The goal is codify your infrastructure. I don't care if you're using Terraform or if you're using ARM templates or the Azure CLI. The goal is to go ahead and codify it so that it can be acted upon in my pipeline, and there are no manual steps to go provision. If you're going to the Azure portal to deploy your infrastructure, you're screwing up, in my opinion. And I don't give a crap what tool you use. So you go find the tool that feels best for you. Right, but don't sit here and have a religious debate over ARM versus Terraform versus Azure CLI. If you want to go have it, just go read my Twitter thread. Because I made a mistake and I said ARM is awesome, and I got obliterated, right, by all these people telling me every other technology I should be using. And what was cool about it is I learned a lot of stuff I didn't know, right? I still didn't end up with Terraform, though. I ended up going with the Azure CLI, which is a brilliant way to be able to, it's so easy to read, and it's idempotent, which I didn't know. I thought it was just procedural, and then if I ran it 5 times, it would break. No, it's idempotent, and I've been using CLI ever since. But don't use it because I just said so. Go do your own evaluation. The goal is infrastructure as code as the best practice. Couldn't care less what technology you use to do it.
Okay, we're going to wrap up now. So first of all, I wanted to thank everybody here for their time. Really do appreciate you taking the day out.
So thank you for that.
Yeah,
that was awesome.
And then, obviously, thanks to Donovan flying over for us.
Sure, no problem.
Yeah. And now, obviously, thanks Claire and Stephen as well. So thank you. Yeah.
And finally, you have to actually thank Martin for setting all this stuff up for me. So
right. So just quickly, there is like, go out. We want you to go do this stuff. Obviously, it's obviously something we believe in. There is help out there. You've seen the Microsoft people that were around today. Feel free to contact them. Feel free to contact us, and don't forget as well, Stephen and Claire are here as well to help. So grab their contact details. Feel free to take pictures. We're going to make sure you get a copy of the slides and things distributed to you, and when the videos are posted, we'll get them. But otherwise, thank you very much for your time, and have a good weekend. Thank you.
That was
a perfect ending.
Oh no, sorry. 27th of April, so Saturday, a couple of weeks, Global Azure Boot Camp is going to be held at Paddington Basin, so 2 Kingdom Square in the Microsoft office. A full day of taking you from Azure Zero to Azure Hero. That's a fully community-led event. It's happening simultaneously around the world on that day. There's like 250 locations worldwide. And obviously we run the WinOps meetup group, which supposed to meet monthly, hasn't met a lot lately, but we have an annual conference that will be the end of September. So if you're interested in DevOps on Windows, a lot of time you go to DevOps conferences, there's not a lot of Windows-related content there for you. That's what the WinOps community is all about. Join us on Meetup, you'll get notified when the conference is happening.
Great.
So
thank you very much, everybody.
Are you doing anything for Global Azure Boot Camp?